Happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you very much.
You had a fun birthday, right?
I had a really fun birthday.
Game of Thrones ended 5 years ago. The cast walked away as global superstars. But what happened next will shock you. One star was begging doctors to let them die while filming season 2. Another was secretly living on credit cards despite earning millions. A third lost so much weight for a new role that they looked like a marble rattling in a bottle. The physical transformations are shocking enough, but the personal revelations will destroy everything you thought you knew about these actors. Emilia Clarke. In 2011, Emilia Clarke had just finished filming the first season of Game of Thrones. She was only 24, and the world was about to know her as the fierce Daenerys Targaryen. But inside a quiet London gym, everything changed. She collapsed. Her head throbbed like it was tearing itself apart. Doctors ran tests and found something terrifying. A subarachnoid hemorrhage. A brain aneurysm had ruptured. Most people die from that without warning. She was rushed into emergency surgery. For 3 hours, surgeons worked through her groin, sliding a thin catheter all the way up into her brain. They placed platinum coils to stop the bleeding. She survived. But when she woke up, she didn't know her name. She couldn't speak. She tried to form words, but only gibberish came out. It's called aphasia, and it steals your ability to speak, to understand, to be understood. She was in so much pain, she begged the doctors to let her die. She wanted them to just pull the plug. After a month in the hospital, she forced herself back to work. Season 2 was waiting, but scans showed a second aneurysm growing silently on the other side of her brain. In 2013, it doubled in size. They tried a quiet, simple procedure. It failed horribly. She started bleeding inside her skull. Emergency brain surgery was the only option. They had to go in through her skull. The recovery was brutal. She lived in constant fear that she'd forget how to speak, or act, or recognize a face. And when they did the scans, they saw it. Parts of her brain were just gone. Blood-starved tissue had died. Her brain had eaten itself. Titanium plates were placed in her skull to hold it together, but somehow, she didn't stop. She didn't disappear. She started a charity in 2019 called Same You to help people like her. In February 2024, Prince William gave her an MBE. She stood beside her mother, Jenny, who also survived a brain aneurysm. Kit Harington. When Game of Thrones ended in 2019, most fans imagined that Kit Harington would walk away as a hero. He had just finished 8 years of playing Jon Snow, one of the most loved characters in TV history. But when the final season wrapped, Kit wasn't at a party or giving a farewell speech. He was drunk, tired, and walking into rehab. Not for a fresh start, but because he had nowhere else to go. He walked through the front doors already under the influence. He sat in one of those group circles, listened for a while, then stood up and said, "Phew, this, not you guys in a circle. No, thank you." Then he walked out. That was his first try. The second time, he checked into another clinic. There, doctors told him he had ADHD, but he still didn't stay. He thought he could handle it on his own. And for the next 4 years, he tried. But the truth was, he couldn't. During those years, something else was happening. In 2022, the news broke that a Jon Snow spin-off was in development. Fans were excited. They thought it was a sure thing. After all, the idea came from Kit himself. He pitched it to HBO, brought in his own team of writers, and began building the story. But as time went on, it got quiet. Then, in April 2024, Kit finally said the words no one expected. The project was dead. Firmly on the shelf, he called it. They just couldn't find a story they were excited about. So after 6 years away from Westeros, Kit still couldn't escape Jon Snow. But now, the sword wasn't in his hand. It was hanging over his head. Today, Kit is sober, over 2.5 years clean. He looks different now. His beard has streaks of gray. His face looks older, more tired. But there's something else in his eyes, something softer. He and his wife, Rose Leslie, the same one who played Ygritte on the show, now have 2 children. A son who's 2 years old, and a daughter just 6 months. He's not playing a warrior anymore. He's raising a family. In August 2024, he finally returned to long-term TV, joining HBO's industry for Season 3. He plays Sir Henry Muck, a rich British aristocrat running a green tech company. It's his first real role since Jon Snow. Around the same time, he also took a step onto the London stage. He joined the West End production of Slave Play, a controversial story that shook up traditional theater. Some performances were only for black audiences, called blackout nights. Kit defended them, saying they created a safe environment and didn't take away anything from anyone else. Peter Dinklage was already one of the most unforgettable faces in television history by the time Game of Thrones ended in 2019. As Tyrion Lannister, he had delivered lines that echoed around the world, earning a staggering $1.2 million per episode during the final season. But what came after surprised everyone. The man who walked away from Westeros with 4 Emmys and a $25 million fortune didn't slow down. He didn't fade into supporting roles or easy voiceovers. He returned in a way no one saw coming, darker, stranger, and more commanding than ever. In 2025, Dinklage stepped back into television with Dexter: Resurrection, not just as a character, but as the core of the storm. He played Leon Prater, a billionaire who didn't kill, but couldn't stop watching those who did. This wasn't a cartoon villain or a flashy psychopath. This was a man obsessed with the minds of murderers, feeding on their stories, building quiet shrines to them, admiring their patterns. He didn't lift a weapon, but the weight of his gaze made killers nervous. In a franchise built around twisted minds, Leon Prater felt eerily real. He became one of the most disturbing antagonists Dexter had ever faced. Not because of what he did, but because of what he didn't have to do. He never hurt anyone. He just understood those who did. While his character got colder, Peter himself took on a new look that startled fans used to the sharp wit and clean beard of Tyrion. In everyday appearances, his hair had grown long and streaked with white. The beard was thick and gray. His face looked heavier with time, not older exactly, but wiser in a way that caught people off guard. Then came September 2024. That's when everything changed again. On the set of Lear Rex, a reimagining of Shakespeare's King Lear, Peter walked out as the fool in a costume no one could explain. A white mohawk, thick white face paint, red eyeshadow, lipstick that looked like war paint. Across from him stood Al Pacino, playing King Lear. The photo spread like wildfire. Nobody had ever seen Dinklage like that. He looked more like a myth than a man, something torn from another dimension. But Peter's boldest moment didn't come from a role or a costume. It came behind a microphone. In January 2022, he sat on Mark Maron's podcast and decided he'd had enough. Disney had just announced a live-action remake of Snow White, and while many praised the casting of a Latina actress, Dinklage didn't hold back. He said the whole thing was still backward, still trapped in the same story about 7 dwarves living in a cave. His voice was sharp, his tone unshaken. He wasn't just speaking for himself, he was calling out the entire industry. His words hit hard. Within days, Disney was scrambling. They called in members of the dwarfism community. They rewrote scenes. They redesigned the characters. The entire production shifted, all because one man spoke up. Sophie Turner. Sophie Turner's life took a wild turn after Game of Thrones ended. One day, she was the soft-faced girl known as Sansa Stark, and the next, everything around her was crumbling. In September 2023, her marriage to Joe Jonas blew up in public. It wasn't just a quiet divorce. It became a full-on international legal fight. She filed a child abduction claim against him under the 1993 Hague Convention, accusing him of keeping their daughters Willa, who was 3, and Delphine, who was 2, in New York without her consent. She said he wouldn't return their passports. The custody battle that followed got messy fast. For months, they had to trade off 2-week periods with the kids between the US and England. It wasn't until September 2024 that the chaos finally settled. A Florida judge named Gina Biovides said the marriage was irretrievably broken. But just when it seemed like Sophie might fade from the spotlight, she shocked everyone again, but this time in a completely different way. By May 2025, she didn't even look like the same person. She had lost 40 pounds and posted photos of herself with carved 6-pack abs that stopped the internet in its tracks. People couldn't believe it. The soft-featured girl from Westeros had turned into someone who looked like she stepped straight out of an action movie. But it wasn't just for show. She was preparing for the biggest role of her career, Lara Croft. Amazon had finally greenlit their Tomb Raider series after years of delays, and Sophie had landed the lead. She was now following in the footsteps of Angelina Jolie and Alicia Vikander. Phoebe Waller-Bridge was writing and producing, and the production schedule was locked in. Sophie was filming 13-hour days and still squeezing in 6 workouts a week. Her body wasn't the only thing changing. Her whole life was shifting. Back in late 2023, while the divorce headlines were still fresh, she started dating someone totally unexpected. His name was Peregrine Pearson, a British aristocrat worth $224 million and future Viscount Cowdray. They seemed solid at first. They kept a low profile, no big red carpets, just the occasional tabloid photo. For nearly 2 years, it looked like she'd found calm after the storm. But in September 2025, that relationship ended too. Just a few weeks after the breakup, rumors started flying again, this time about her being seen on a quiet date with Chris Martin, the 48-year-old lead singer of Coldplay, who had just split from Dakota Johnson. No one could confirm it, but the whispers were everywhere. And while all that was happening, she proved again that she wasn't just some girl who used to be on a hit show. In 2024, she starred in ITV's Joan, playing Joan Harington, a real-life diamond thief with a complicated past. Sophie didn't just hold her own, she carried the entire series. It was gritty and sharp and nothing like the world of Dragons and Thrones. People started to see her not as Sansa, not as a tabloid headline, but as someone who had rebuilt herself completely. Maisie Williams, she was just a little girl when she stepped into the world as Arya Stark, sword in hand, eyes cold, always running toward danger. Maisie Williams had never acted before. She was only 12. By the final seasons of Game of Thrones, she was earning $150,000 per episode, building a $6 million net worth, and pulling off fight scenes that made her the face of a generation. But behind all that strength, there was a quiet pain she had never spoken aloud, not until years later. In September 2022, on a podcast called Diary of a CEO, she finally said it. Her voice didn't crack, but what she shared broke something in the room. Before she was even 8, she said her father had pulled her into something she called a cult against her mother. Her mom had escaped when Maisie was just 4 months old, but the damage didn't stop there. She said she'd go to school wondering why the other kids didn't feel that same fear or dread, why they didn't wake up every night like she did, heart pounding, stuck between sleep and panic. The trauma settled in her bones. It never really left. In 2024, she went through something even harder. To play Catherine Dior, the sister of Christian Dior, who survived Nazi concentration camps, Maisie dropped 25 pounds and shaved her head completely. She woke up at 4 a.m. every day. She barely ate. Sometimes she stayed awake all night, just eating a handful of nuts. She told Harper's Bazaar that she felt like a marble rattling inside a bottle. It wasn't just acting. It was disappearing into someone else's pain, someone else's war, someone else's silence. And when she looked in the mirror after all of it, even she couldn't recognize the face looking back. The girl who used to swing needle was gone. Now she was 5 feet tall, hollowed out by both performance and memory, watched by 9.6 million people on Instagram who had no idea what it took to stand upright. Lena Headey, who ruled King's Landing as Cersei Lannister, had a story that wasn't written by any screenwriter. In 2013, while Game of Thrones was still climbing, Lena stood in court and told the judge she had less than $5 in her bank account. She begged for $6,000 from a $46,000 tax refund she shared with her ex-husband, Peter Lofgren. She said she was living on credit, couldn't afford groceries, and didn't know how to take care of her 2-year-old son, Wiley. The court said no. She left without help. 6 years later, in 2019, she was making $1.2 million per episode. Just 25 minutes of screen time in the final season gave her a payday most people never dream of. But money didn't protect her from the mess. Her marriage to Peter had already ended in 2012. She married again in 2018 to Dan Caden. That ended in 2019. She kept moving forward, but her body carried reminders. She tattooed Lofgren on her wrist once. After the divorce, she didn't erase it. She added Wiley instead. Some things you don't remove, you layer them. 13 tattoos in total marked her skin. Hindu gods, birds flying out of cages, butterflies, lotus flowers. All of them said something that words couldn't. In 2017, She joined the Me Too movement and told the world what Harvey Weinstein had done. She said he'd blacklisted her from Miramax films after she refused him. She never looked back. But the weight of everything still followed her. After Wiley was born, she fell into postpartum depression. She talked about it publicly. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She wanted people to know how heavy it got. And yet, like Maisie, she kept rising. In October 2022, Lena married again, this time to Mark Menchaca from Ozark. They had the ceremony in Italy. Peter Dinklage and Sophie Turner were there, friends from the Game of Thrones days. She was 51. She was busy again, filming a new Charlie Brooker series for Netflix, playing a lead role in The Abandons with Gillian Anderson. The premiere was set for December 4th, 2025, and somewhere in November 2024, George R.R. Martin had a quiet meeting with Maisie Williams. He said it could be fun, that something might happen again in Westeros. Nobody knows if Arya Stark will return, but if she does, it won't be the same girl. It'll be someone who's seen her own darkness, lived through the fire, and come back with scars she doesn't hide. Nikolaj Coster-Waldau. In the final seasons of Game of Thrones, Nikolaj Coster-Waldau stood tall as Jaime Lannister, collecting $720,000 per episode, while wearing armor and secrets like a second skin. He was golden-haired, sharp-jawed, and perfectly fitted for a world built on blood and betrayal. But after the cameras stopped and Westeros faded to black in 2019, Nikolaj didn't chase more fame or more youth. Instead, he quietly stepped away and started letting time leave its marks on his face without resistance. Now, 55. With gray in his beard and lines around his eyes, he's turned into something few in Hollywood dare to become, himself. In August 2025, while promoting his series King and Conqueror, he surprised everyone, not with a role, but with honesty. He sat across from interviewers and called anti-aging treatments a waste of time. He looked right into the camera and said, "There still hasn't been anyone who's not ended up dead." In an industry that injects fear into every wrinkle, that one sentence sliced through like a sword. He wasn't selling youth. He was standing still in his own aging body, unapologetic, clear-eyed, and proud. But that boldness isn't new. It's the same quiet certainty that shaped his life for decades. Back in 1997, on March 17th at exactly 8:35 in the morning, he met a woman at a radio station. Her name was Nukaka. He decided right then he was going to marry her. He never changed his mind. They got married in 1998, and now, 27 years later, they're still together. Nukaka wasn't just anyone. She was Miss Greenland in 1990 and placed 19th in the Miss Universe pageant, still Greenland's highest ever ranking. But she didn't just wear crowns. She built a life with him. And now their two daughters are acting too, walking into the same world their parents shaped with quiet steadiness. What came after Game of Thrones wasn't red carpets or luxury homes. Nikolaj called it what it was. He lost his day job. For years, he had stayed in West Hollywood hotels while filming. Once the show ended, he had to find a real place to live again. With a net worth of $16 million, he could have chosen anything. But he didn't. His Los Angeles home is so minimal it barely looks lived in. The bedrooms have less furniture than a hotel room. It's calm, it's plain, it's exactly how he wants it. And now, in 2025, he's returned to history, playing William the Conqueror. No gold hair, no perfect jawline, no polished image, just the same man. Now 55, standing in front of the camera with more years behind him and no fear of the mirror. Gwendoline Christie. Before the sword, before the armor, before anyone called her Brienne, Gwendoline Christie was just a girl who wanted to move. She had the grace of a gymnast and a dream that floated high until it all snapped at once. At just 11 years old, her back gave out. A spinal injury crushed her future as a semi-professional rhythmic gymnast and pulled every muscle in her spine. Something inside her broke, but instead of quitting, she shifted. She walked away from ribbons and routines and aimed her fire at the stage. The road wasn't gentle. She enrolled at Drama Centre London, a place so intense students called it the Trauma Centre. They didn't sugarcoat anything. She was told she was rubbish all day, every day. She needed money, so she walked dogs. Not just any dogs, She was hired by actor Simon Callow. Between walks, she organized his 4,000 CDs just to pay rent. Every step forward felt like pushing through mud, and to make things worse, people never saw her as a star. Standing at 6'3", she was constantly mocked, constantly doubted. She was told she was too tall, that she'd never fit the mold, that no one in Hollywood would take a woman like her seriously. They tried to shrink her spirit to match their box. But Gwendoline didn't shrink, she prepared. When the role of Brienne came up, she didn't just show up. She trained like it was war. For 8 weeks, she built herself into the character. She gained 6 kilograms of muscle. She chopped off her hair. She learned horseback riding, sword fighting, kickboxing, yoga, anything that made her tougher, she did it. When Game of Thrones aired on April 15, 2012, she stepped onto that screen and changed the way people saw strength. She wasn't small, she wasn't quiet, she was steel. She was presence. And somewhere in the crowd of new fans was former President Barack Obama. Even he couldn't look away. But even when the world clapped for her, the industry didn't. In 2019, when HBO submitted their official Emmy nominations for the final season, they completely left Gwendoline out. No support, no push. They snubbed her completely. Most actors would have moved on, not her. She took $225 from her own pocket and submitted herself. Paid for her own entry, no agent, no backing, just guts. And it worked. She landed the nomination, stood beside the very actresses HBO had chosen instead. It wasn't just a win, it was a message. She didn't need anyone's permission to be excellent. By 2025, the world had caught up. Her career exploded. Her net worth hit $4 million. She built a life with Giles Deacon, the British fashion designer she's been with since 2013. She earned another Emmy nomination, this time for the sci-fi series Severance. Then, in a twist only she could pull off, she returned from the dead as a ghost in Wednesday Season 2. It dropped in September 2025, and proved she wasn't going anywhere. Gwendoline Christie didn't just break the mold. She crushed it, set it on fire, and walked through the ashes. Richard Madden, the young king in the North who died at the Red Wedding in 2013, quietly built an empire while everyone thought he was gone. Back when Game of Thrones began, he was just another new face. HBO barely paid him. No one knew his name. The show grew into a monster hit, but Richard's paychecks didn't reflect it. He watched the world cheer while his bank account stayed silent, but he didn't stay quiet forever. Everything changed in 2018. That year, he starred in the thriller series Bodyguard. It exploded, and so did his career. He won a Golden Globe. The money started to follow. His net worth shot from $5 million in 2018 to $8 million by 2021. By 2025, he had carved out his place, not just as an actor, but as a force. The body changed too. For Eternals in 2021, he trained like a machine. He called it physically fucking draining. Hours on wires, bruises from flying scenes, exhaustion written across his face in behind-the-scenes shots. Then came Citadel in 2023. More bulking, more strength. He looked harder, sharper, like a man sculpted by pressure. It was a long way from the boy who died in a tent, but success came with shadows. Fame brought fear. Paparazzi turned his life into a hunted zone. Photographers hid in trees outside his apartment. They crawled under cars just to snap him stepping out. He built a secret spy network. His London neighbors texted him warnings when they spotted camera lenses through windows. He started wearing the same clothes for days, so the photos couldn't be sold. If every picture looked like the same day, tabloids couldn't profit. It was survival. Quiet. Clever. Necessary. His personal life stayed under lock and key. From 2012 to 2015, he was with Doctor Who actress Jenna Coleman. Later came model Suki Waterhouse. Then TV host Laura Whitmore. Then actress Ellie Bamber, who he dated for 2 years before it ended in 2019. But after that, the curtain came down. By 2024, he was reportedly single and guarding his privacy with everything he had. He stopped discussing relationships, stopped feeding the fire,